All right, I want to go back to September 29th, 2006. That's when Petty Officer Michael Mansour is United States Navy SEAL. He's operating in Ramadi, Iraq. Mansour is standing on a roof in Ramadi, and he's standing in front of a doorway to this roof. He has two Navy SEAL teammates lying in the sniper-prone position next to him. They've already taken AK-47 fire and a rocket-propelled grenade, but they're not exactly sure where the enemy is. There's a bit of a lull in the fighting. Insurgents have blocked off the streets in Ramadi, and there's someone on the loudspeaker in the town mosque yelling, "Kill the Americans!" As Mansour and his team are looking for the next attack, an insurgent from an unknown location throws a grenade up on the roof. It hits Mansour in the chest, and it falls to his feet. Due to the length of the throw, there's no opportunity to pick up the grenade and throw it back. He has only a split second to make a decision. He can leap through the doorway behind him and save himself, but if he does, his two teammates lying on the roof will surely die. Mansour yells, "Grenade!" But instead of jumping backward to save himself, he jumps forward, chest first, onto the grenade. It detonates. 30 minutes later, 25-year-old Michael Mansour is dead. His two colleagues lying on the roof receive only minor injuries because Mansour's body muffled the blast. One of the survivors said at Mansour's funeral, "Mikey looked death in the face that day and said, 'You will not take my friends, I will go in their stead.'" I've never seen a United States president cry until April of 2008. That's when President George W. Bush called Mansour's parents into the East Room of the White House to give them their son's Medal of Honor posthumously. The president couldn't even get through the citation without breaking down. Since then, Mansour's High School in Garden Grove, California, built a new stadium. They named it Michael A. Mansour Memorial Stadium. The golden trident insignia that the SEALs wear dominates the 50-yard line. January 2019, 14 months ago, North Island, California, just outside of San Diego, the United States Navy commissioned the USS Michael Mansour, the newest guided missile destroyer in the fleet, Zumwalt class. This is Mansour's mother, Sally, being escorted onto the ship, named in honor of her son. Mansour was a devout Roman Catholic. September 29th in the Catholic calendar is St. Michael's Day. Now, why did they do this? Because Michael Mansour literally sacrificed himself to save his friends. There's no greater love than to sacrifice yourself to save your friends, said Jesus of Nazareth before he went to the cross. Michael Mansour sacrificed himself to save his friends. The question is, would anybody sacrifice himself to save you? And the answer is, someone already has. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. But in today's culture, people don't think the story's true. They think it's invented. After all, it's got miracles in it, like a resurrection. Who in here has seen a resurrection? No, we haven't seen a resurrection, yet we're forced to believe in one if we're going to be Christians. How rational is that? And by the way, these documents we call the Bible were written down by religious people. We know religious people tend to embellish things, so why should we even believe they're true? I actually think it's quite easy to show that Christianity is true. You only need to answer 4 questions in the affirmative to show that it's true. In other words, if you investigate these 4 questions, I think you'll realize that the answer to these 4 questions is yes. And if the answer to these 4 questions is yes, then Christianity is true. What are the 4 questions? Here are the 4 questions. Now that you're all awake, that really grooving music is actually from our TV show, which is on every Wednesday nights. Of course, here in Houston, it would be on at 8 p.m., DirecTV channel 378. If you don't have DirecTV, it's on Roku. Anyone here have Roku? All right, look for NRB TV on Roku for National Religious Broadcasters. If you don't have DirecTV and you don't have Roku, it's on this new technology sweeping Spring, Texas right now. It's called the Internet. Have you guys heard of this? Yeah, it's broadcast on our website, crossexamine.org, right there at that time, 8 p.m. Central. We're on radio every Saturday morning. Somebody told me it's on here in Houston. It's like 88.3? Yeah, it's the American Family Radio Network, 88.3. But it would be, 9 a.m. here. And I know if you're a young person on Saturday, you don't get up to the crack of noon. So you can listen to it anytime you want on iTunes or on our app. 2 words in the App Store, Cross-Examined. And what we do is we provide evidence for Christianity, and we cross-examine ideas against it. Now, why are these the 4 questions? Truth, God, miracles, and the New Testament. This is going to serve as our outline here this morning and tonight. The first question is, does truth exist? Why is that an important question? Well, you hear people saying there's no truth. You got your truth. I got my truth. All truth is relative. You've heard these claims, right? Well, if there's no truth, obviously Christianity can't be true. Of course, if there's no truth, atheism can't be true either. And by the way, if there's no truth, why would you ever go to school? I mean, what's the point, right? Of course there's truth. But we'll deal with that first here this morning. Second question, does God exist? Obviously, Christianity can't be true if there's no God. But I hope to show you this morning and tonight through 3 arguments that there really is a theistic God. What's a theistic God? That's a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator who created all things and sustains all things to this very moment. We're going to look at these 3 arguments. These arguments are taught in the Bible, but you don't need the Bible to know them. In fact, you don't need the Bible to show that God exists. We're not going to even refer to the Bible when we deal with point 2. The third question is, are miracles possible? Obviously, Christianity can't be true if miracles are not possible. But I hope to show you tonight that not only are miracles possible, but the greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred, and even atheists are admitting the data for this miracle. We'll see that tonight. Then we're going to get to the key question, is the New Testament true? The New Testament doesn't have a prayer if there's no truth, no God, or no miracles. But if truth exists, if God exists, if miracles are possible, then we can see if the documents that we call the New Testament are reliable enough to let us know if one particular event from the ancient world took place, and that would be the resurrection of Jesus. Because if Jesus rose from the dead, game over, Christianity's true. Of course, if he didn't rise from the dead, game over, it's false. You might as well sleep in on Sunday and do what you want the rest of the week, because if Jesus hasn't risen from the dead, Christianity can't be true. Paul even says that in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Your faith's in vain if he didn't rise from the dead. Now, I know some of you are looking at that going, wait a minute, Frank, what about the Old Testament? Believe the Old Testament's true? Well, look, if the New Testament's reliable, you get the Old Testament thrown in. Why? Who's in the New Testament that can authenticate the Old Testament? Jesus, yes. If you're ever in Sunday school, you don't know the answer, just say Jesus, you'll probably be right. It's Jesus, Pastor. That's right. If Jesus really is God, as the New Testament documents claim he is, now that's a big if, but if he really is God, whatever God teaches is true. Jesus taught the entire Old Testament as the Word of God. So if the New Testament's reliable, you get the Old Testament thrown in. Now, there's a lot more detail than these 4 questions. If you want to go into detail, you can. The book's available on the book table, as well as a 12-part DVD series, which teaches this visually. Some people get our workbooks with that, and they teach it in Sunday school, small groups, homeschools. You can get that there. And then there's a newer book there called Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. I've noticed that when atheists are arguing there is no God, they're actually stealing aspects of reality that would only exist if God existed in order to say he doesn't exist. In effect, atheists have to sit in God's lap to slap his face. Now, If you do get a book or a DVD back there, I just want to point out that all the proceeds from the sale of the books and the DVDs will go to feed needy children. Mine, okay? Just so you know, I got 3 sons, so I need some help. Actually, they're a little bit older now. Right after college, I went in the Navy for 8 years, which, by the way, stands for Never Again Volunteer Yourself. But my sons were smarter than me. They wanted to go in the military, so the oldest 2 went into the Air Force. So the oldest son right now is in it. Yes, that's right. The oldest son right now is an intelligence officer in San Angelo, Texas. In fact, he's reading your email right now. And he, in 2 weeks from yesterday, is going to marry another intelligence officer, and I'm doing the ceremony. That's going to be nerve-wracking in Charlotte. That's where we live, in Charlotte, North Carolina. So they're, 2 intelligence officers getting together. Their kids are going to be Einsteins, right? The second son is already married, and his wife is pregnant. His first grandbaby coming in August. Right? Pastor Larry knows about that, right? Larry and Debbie, they know about this, right? They got 3 grandkids in 3 months. So, but my son out there in Enid, Oklahoma is a KC-10 pilot. You guys know what a KC-10 is? It's a big plane that refuels other planes in flight. They got the boom coming out of the back and then smaller planes that come up and get gas from them as they're flying. So what we say about our middle son, Spencer, is that every day he flies up to 30,000 feet. He sits around and he passes gas. And he gets paid for it. This is every man's dream. If I got paid to pass gas, I'd be a multimillionaire already. The third son is not in the military, but he is out of the house. So my wife and I are now empty nesters. Any empty nesters in here? Yeah, it took us a while to get used to that. About 10 minutes. That's how long it took to change the locks. Yeah, we love our kids, but they're messy. You empty nesters, you know this, right? I mean, what do you got to clean the house? Every 2 weeks when they're gone? Every 2 hours when they're there, right? Of course. Now, I can't cover all the material even tonight. So if you want this entire PowerPoint presentation, just text the word evidence to 44222. Text the word evidence to 44222. No quotes on it, just the word evidence. We'll send you this entire PowerPoint presentation in a PDF format. We'll send you the first chapter of Stealing from God right there and some other presentations from my friend J. Warner Wallace, the cold case homicide detective. We'll send all that to you for free. Just text the word evidence to 44222. But what we're going to do this morning and tonight is to go through this evidence. Now, before we do, some of you may be asking, well, wait a minute, Frank, why even do this? Aren't we supposed to just have faith? No, 1,000 times no. In fact, not only is it important to know what you believe and why you believe it, the Bible actually commands you to know what you believe and why you believe it. Peter put it this way: always be ready to give an answer for everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. Now, the gentleness and respect thing is hard for me because I'm originally from New Jersey, all right? So you guys, you've got to give reasons for what you believe. And if you notice, if you try and evangelize people today, they're going to have questions. And so you got to be able to give some reasons, all right? So what we're going to do is we're going to start right here at point 1, does truth exist? And I'm going to go quickly. And as I say, I am from New Jersey, so I have to warn you right now, I speak at gusts. I speak at 150 words a minute with gusts to 350. So you cannot listen in Southern, all right? We're going to move quickly. Are you guys ready to go? All right. Whenever you start talking about truth, you always have to start with Jack Nicholson, right? Because Tom Cruise had him on the witness stand and he said to him, "Colonel, I want the truth." And Nicholson said, that was worse than the first service. Come on, he didn't say it that way. You can't handle it. If he said it that way, the movie would have gone nowhere. That's not how he said it. Here's how he said it.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
All right, let's try it again. I want the truth. Now that felt better, didn't it? Thank you, Grandma. That was beautiful. Well, there's a lot of people that can't handle the truth. They're saying, you got your truth, I got my truth, all truth is relative. Well, if you don't get anything outside of what we talk about here tonight or this morning and tonight, this is going to be the most important thing thinking skill we're going to talk about. It's so important, I submit to you, that half of what you need to know to defend the Christian faith, you'll already know if you get this thinking skill down. It only takes 5 minutes to learn. And it's important. Why? Because this thinking skill will help you discover what is false. And half the battle is discovering what is false. There are so many false philosophies and sayings out there that if you can easily detect them as being false, you're going to save yourself a lot of pain and suffering. Why? Because if you start living by false principles, pretty soon you're going to smack up against reality and it's going to hurt. Now, this thinking skill is easy to learn, but I must admit to you, I was a dimwit because I was 33 years old. I already had a master's degree and I didn't know this. And it's so simple. Why didn't I know this? Because nobody ever taught me logic. I had to go to seminary to learn logic. If you don't do anything else in school, learn logic. That's how you learn how to think. And here's the thinking skill. I'm just going to give you an example of using this thinking skill. Suppose someone were to come up to you and say there is no truth. Yeah, that's the question you're going to ask. If somebody says there's no truth, you're going to say, hey, is that true? Is it true that there's no truth? Because if it's true that there's no truth, the claim there is no truth can't be true, but it claims to be true. Did I say that right? This is known as a self-defeating statement. What's a self-defeating statement? A self-defeating statement violates its own standard. It says it's true, there's no truth. A self-defeating statement violates the law of non-contradiction, that opposite ideas cannot be both true at the same time and in the same sense, right? Look, either God exists or he doesn't exist. They both can't be true, right? One or the other's true. Either truth exists. If you try and say it doesn't exist, you're uttering a truth claim. And there are many self-defeating statements. Like, for example, if I were to say I can't speak a word in English, what would you say? You just used English to say it. Or if I said my parents had no kids that lived. Or my brother is an only child, right? These are self-defeating statements. And you've got to get good at recognizing self-defeating statements because there are so many false philosophies out here. And here's how you do it. What you do is you turn the claim on itself. So somebody says there's no truth, you turn the claim on itself and you say, is that? Let's do a few more of these. Suppose someone says all truth is relative. If you turn the claim on itself, all truth is relative, what question are you going to ask back? Is that a relative truth? No, that's an absolute truth. You're claiming it's absolutely true, all truth is relative. It defeats itself. Or what if somebody says there are no absolutes? If you turn the claim on itself, what are you going to say? Are you absolutely sure? Because that's an absolute truth claim right there. How about if somebody says you can't know anything? How do you know that you can't know? How about if somebody says it's true for you but not for me? You've probably heard that. Right? Well, Christianity may be true for you, to Buddhism is true for me. What do you say to that? Turn the claim on itself. If somebody says it's true for you but not for me, say, hey, is that true for everybody? Is true for you but not for me true for everybody? Because if true for you but not for me is true for everybody, then true for you but not for me can't be true because it's true for everybody. Did I say that right? I know that can give you intellectual constipation if you think about it long enough. But that's because it's self-defeating. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. Actually, there's a more fun way of dealing with this. Suppose you're driving across Texas on Highway 10 and you're going 90. Cop sees you, pulls you over, walks up to your car, knocks on the glass. You put the glass down. He says, you were going 90. It's easy to get out of a ticket. You simply say, ha, that's true for you, but not for me. And you speed away. Look, if it's true you were going 90, that's true for all people at all times in all places when referring to you at that time. By the way, it's also true that if God exists, that's true for all people at all times in all places, regardless of what you believe about it. Now, I go to a lot of churches. I normally ask people, do you think Christianity's true? And most people will say yes, and then I'll ask them why. Do you know what answer I get more than any other? Because I have faith. Is that a good answer? Does your faith change whether or not Christianity's true? Does your faith change whether or not God exists or Jesus rose from the dead? No. So why do we say faith? What? I mean, do you have to believe something to make it true? Do you have to believe in gravity to stay on the ground? Do people who don't believe in gravity float away? Hey, look, there's another one. Hey, if you believe, you'll come back. No, that's not the way it works. You say, well, why is the Bible always talking about faith? Because there's two kinds of faith. This is very important. There's belief that, and then there's belief in. Belief that is getting evidence that God exists, that Jesus rose from the dead, that the Bible is telling the truth about these things. In order to discover whether that's true or not, you have to get evidence. That's what we do when we say we're giving evidence, we're doing apologetics. Doesn't mean we're saying we're sorry. It comes from a Greek word which means to defend. So when Pastor Steve is going through, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, he's giving evidence that Christianity's true. But all the belief that in the world won't get your moral transgressions forgiven. For that, you got to go from belief that to belief in. And there's a difference. Belief that is just of the head. I've got the evidence. Belief in is not just of the head, it's also of the heart. Not only do I know it's true, I want to trust in it. Do you know the half-brother of Jesus who wrote that little book in the New Testament called James, right? Do you know that he actually says in his book that the demons believe that God exists, but they tremble? Do you know that the demons know that God exists better than we do? But they don't trust in him. They don't want to trust in him. They just intellectually know that God exists. And by the way, we know the difference between belief that and belief in relationships, don't we? When I first met my wife 34 years ago, I got evidence that she would be a good wife, but all the evidence in the world didn't make her my wife. I had to take a step of trust in her to ask her to be my wife. And in a momentary lapse of judgment, she said yes. That's the difference between belief that and belief in. You can know something's true and still not trust in it. Yesterday when I flew here from Charlotte, where I live, I had evidence that the pilots were trained, ATC was going to get us here rightly, the plane was properly maintained, but I didn't really trust in that until I got on the plane. See? So there's a difference between belief that and belief in. You can know it's true, but not believe in it. Is it? Thanks, Larry. It's true. So now you can trust in it. And when you trust in it, then you can have your moral transgressions forgiven. Now, if you don't want to trust in it, that's fine. God, you have free will. You don't have to trust in it. God will not force you into heaven against your will. If you don't want him now, you're not going to want him in eternity. All right, how about this? By the way, that's another point that we need to make here, that we probably ought to stop using the word faith, because in Greek, it actually means, as you said, it means trust. Trust in. After you know that it's true, trust in it. So in the Bible, faith doesn't mean I have no evidence. It means I'm trusting in what I have good evidence to believe. Trusting in what I have good evidence to believe. How about this? You hear this statement a lot too. There's no truth in anything but science. Or we get all our truth from science. Have you heard this? What's the problem with the claim? Turn the claim on itself. What's the problem with it? If somebody says all truth comes from science, you're going to say, is that a science? No, that's not a scientific truth. That's a philosophical claim. You can't prove that in the laboratory. In fact, the most important things in life have nothing to do with science. Honey, do you love me? Yeah. How come? I don't know. Let's run an experiment. No. No, and you can't do science without philosophy. Science is built on philosophy. In fact, you can't understand the Bible without philosophy either. You can't do anything without philosophy. Philosophy is good thinking. You get a PhD. What does a PhD stand for? Philosophy of history, biology, physics, whatever it is. In fact, in the chapter in Stealing from God on Science, here's the title of the chapter. Science doesn't say anything. Scientists do. Science doesn't say a word. It's scientists that say things. And why do they say things? Because they have a philosophy that they bring to the data, and when they interpret the data, if they're open to both types of causes, like intelligence or natural causes, they'll see that much of the evidence points towards an intelligent cause. But if they philosophically ruled out intelligence, before they look at the evidence, they're always going to say it's a natural cause. Why? That's based on their philosophy. It's not based on the science. How about this? You hear this a lot too. You should doubt everything. The skeptical claim. You should doubt everything. If you turn the claim on itself, what are you going to say to the doubter? Should I doubt that? I mean, why are skeptics skeptical of everything but skepticism? You ever notice that? They don't doubt that. They think it's true. Now, how many people in here sometimes doubt, whether you're Christian or atheist or anywhere in between, how many people in here sometimes doubt that what you believe is true? Look, if you don't have your hand up right now, you're probably not thinking very much. Of course. I've written books on this stuff, and sometimes I wake up in the morning and I go, I don't even know if this is true. You ever do that? But then I start thinking about my doubts, and I realize that most of my doubts are emotional. They're not intellectual. In other words, the evidence for Christianity is really good. What's changing is me. Good day, everything's fine. Bad day, don't know. Good day, fine. Bad day, don't know. What's changing, me or the evidence? I'm going up and down. In fact, my friend Greg Kokel, you may have heard of his book, Tactics, a great book to get if you haven't gotten it. Tactics says this. He's a Christian apologist. He says, before I have my first cup of coffee in the morning, I'm an atheist. After I have my first cup, I'm a Jehovah's Witness. By the time I have my second cup, I'm back to being a Christian again, right? See, what's changing, him or the evidence? Right? He's going up and down. In fact, sometimes I see people on college campuses where we do this presentation a lot, and they'll say, you know, Frank, I used to be a Christian, but I lost my faith. And what I want to say to these people is, so what does that prove? Your psychology changed? Does that mean God no longer exists because your psychology changed? Because your psychology changed? Jesus hasn't risen from the dead? Your psychology will tell you nothing about whether something's true or not. The evidence will. You might have bad psychology because you had bad eggs this morning. Or bad psychology because it's not sunny enough out. Your psychology changes with the weather. But the evidence doesn't change. So if you look at the evidence, I think you'll realize that Christianity is true. In fact, if you look at the evidence, I think you'll realize that you ought to start doubting your doubts, because if you start doubting your doubts, then you're back to knowing something for sure. Have you guys ever thought about doubting your doubts? I doubt it. Or how about this? This is a big one in our culture. You ought not judge. If someone says you ought not judge, what are you going to say back to them? You're going to say what? Is that a judgment? I mean, if we ought not judge, why are you judging me for judging? You say, wait a minute, Frank, didn't Jesus say don't make judgments? Nope, never said it. Sure he did. He said it in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. All right, I know it's going to sound a little weird, but it's true. There are no verses in the Bible. There are no verses in the Bible. Do you think when Matthew was writing the Gospel of Matthew, he said, okay, here's chapter 7, verse 1? No, when were the chapter and verse divisions put into the text? About 500 years ago to help us navigate the text, which is important because it's a really long series of books. You get lost in there without numbers, right? The problem is we tend to think if it's got a number in front of it, we can just take it out of context and make it say whatever we want. Next time somebody says, I got a verse for you, you ought to go, time out, I got to read around the verse to see what's going on, okay? Because you can make something say whatever you want. See, Jesus doesn't say judge not, and he stops right there. What does he say? Judge not, lest you be judged by the same standard you judge others, you be judged by that standard. So before you try and take the speck out of your brother's eye, you hypocrite, which is a judgment, by the way, take the log out of your own eye first, then you'll be better able to help your brother. Is Jesus telling us not to judge here? No, he's telling us to take the speck out of our brother's eye. That involves making a judgment. He's simply saying, get that problem out of your life first so you can better help your brother. So this is not a command not to judge. It's actually a command on how to judge. In other words, don't judge hypocritically. If you've got that problem, fix it, then go help your brother. But it would be completely ridiculous to say don't make judgments. Why? Because number one, it's a judgment itself, and number two, you'd be dead already if you didn't make judgments. You made 100 judgments just getting over here this morning, and now some of you are going, that was a bad judgment. I shouldn't have come here. This guy's crazy. No. You make judgments every day between good choices and bad choices, safe choices and dangerous choices. Everybody makes judgments. Atheists make judgments. What judgments do atheists make? There's no God. It's a judgment. Jesus didn't rise from the dead. It's a judgment. Bible's not telling the truth. That's a judgment. There's no objective morality. That's a judgment. There is no meaning to life. These are all judgments. The question isn't whether or not you can make judgments. The question is, are your judgments true? I will say this, though. Jesus did save a very stern rebuke for people who were judgmental. And who were the judgmental ones in his day? Pharisees. Who were the Pharisees? They were the religious and political leaders of Israel. They helped run Israel through the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council. And Jesus went after these politicians. Are you telling me Jesus got involved in politics? Yes! And by the way, he wasn't so nice doing it. In fact, if you think Jesus was a sweet guy who's never said a bad word about anyone, you have not read John chapter 2, John chapter 8, or Matthew chapter 23. What happens in John chapter 2? Jesus makes a whip personally, and then he goes and he jacks people up in the temple. Jesus? Yes. And then John chapter 8, he's having an argument with these same Pharisee people, these politicians, religious leaders. He's having a bit of an argument. He gets to the point in the conversation where he says, your father is the devil. Jesus, you can't say that. That's not very Christ-like. Excuse me, I am Christ. Can you imagine you're having an argument with somebody and you stop and you go, your father is the devil. Never do that with a sibling, by the way, okay? But Jesus said that. And then in Matthew 23, he's talking to these same Pharisees and he says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Oh, you look great on the outside. You're whitewashed tombs. But on the inside, you're full of dead men's bones. You go a mile to make a convert, and then once you make them a convert, you make them twice as much a son of hell as you are. How will you avoid being condemned to hell? What? Sweet and gentle Jesus said this? Yes, Jesus was not Barney. Can't we all get along, boys and girls? No. I came to bring a sword. It's going to divide mother and daughter, father and son. He was not Mr. Rogers. Can you say kindness, boys and girls? I mean, he was kind most of the time, but he certainly didn't go around saying, this sermon brought to you by the letter Q. No, Jesus was tough. Don't buy into the wimpified version of Jesus that the culture. Read the text for yourself. In fact, why do you think Jesus was killed? For skipping around saying, love your neighbor? Does that get anyone killed? Love your neighbor. You must die. No. He got killed, number one, for claiming to be God, which is blasphemy to the Jews and sedition to the Romans. And number two, he spoke truth to power, particularly the temple authorities, and they didn't like that. They knew if this guy succeeded, they were out of a job. That's why they know that Jesus has resurrected Lazarus from the dead. And what does Caiaphas, the high priest, say right after it happens? It's better that one innocent man die than all of the nation perish. They knew he was the Messiah intellectually. They didn't want to buy it. They wanted to kill him instead. Men love darkness rather than light. By the way, I've noticed one other thing about judging. You ever notice that when you compliment somebody, which is a judgment, nobody gets upset? You know, you say to your best friend, I really love you. You're such a wonderful person. I wish I could be like you. Do you think your friend's going to go, who do you think you are judging me? Like, your friend's never going to say that, right? See, I've noticed that people don't have a problem with judging. They just have a problem with judgments they don't like. In fact, if you tell somebody something that's true and they get upset with you, you just help convict them. As Augustine said, we love the truth when it enlightens us. We hate the truth when it convicts us. A few military people in here, you always get more flack when you're over the target. If you tell somebody something that's true and they're shooting back at you, you're over the target. They don't want their evil deeds exposed. Jesus said, men love darkness rather than light. We don't want our evil deeds exposed. In fact, I submit to you that probably everybody in this room, sometime in the past week, has probably barked at somebody that you love because they told you the truth. And you didn't, maybe even getting over here this morning, right? Why? Because you didn't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it either, do we? Our hearts are evil. And we make judgments all the time. Look, we have to make judgments without being judgmental. Somebody put it this way, that evangelism is just one beggar showing another beggar where the food is. That's the attitude we have to have, because a Christian is no better than an atheist without Jesus. Everybody needs Jesus. Now, we could spend more time on this, but we don't have time. We got to keep moving. I just want to point out one thing. Can everybody see that this statement right here shoots itself? Can everybody see that? Okay? If you've got this down, then you've got the most important thinking skill down. So when people say there's no truth, you're going to say, is that true. Same thing with all truth is relative and there are no absolutes and you ought not judge and all that stuff. It's all self-defeating, okay? So there is truth out there and you can know it. The next question is it true that God exists? And let me just say two quick things before we get to the God question. One is that if our reasoning is good to this point, and I think it is, it's pretty self-evident, that relativism and postmodernism are false. Because they say it's true, that there's no truth. They can't be true, right? So you can't get away from truth. Actually, there's one way you can get away from it temporarily, and that is you suppress it. This is what Paul talks about in Romans chapter 1. We suppress the truth and unrighteousness to go our own way. That's why when we do this on a college campus, like I was just up at Sam Houston State a couple of weeks ago, we'll put up a microphone for Q&A, and we'll do that tonight as well. And if an atheist gets up to the microphone and expresses any hostility at all, I'll normally stop and I'll ask this question. And this is a question you ought to ask people who are not Christians. The question is this: if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? I've had atheists stand in front of that microphone in front of hundreds of people and say, no. I thought you claimed to be reasonable. How is it reasonable that if something were true, you wouldn't believe it? Well, it's not reasonable. The problem isn't here. The problem's here. They don't want it to be true. They don't want there to be a God. Why? Because they want to be God of their own lives. They think God is going to get in the way of the fun they want to have. You see, many people are not on a truth quest. You know what we're on? We're on a happiness quest. And we're just going to believe whatever we think is going to make us happy. Here's the problem. You can do a lot of fun things making yourself happy over the short term, but over the long term, it's a disaster. And everyone in here who's over 40 knows what I'm talking about because many of us have tried it ourselves. If you want to get true contentment and happiness, you got to go straight through truth, and Jesus is the truth. So always ask the question, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? If the person hesitates or says no, the problem isn't in his head or her head, it's in the heart. So what do you do with such people? You love them, you pray for them, and you plant seeds every now and then. And maybe at one point they'll be open. Right now they're not. But you can reveal whether they're open or not by simply asking the question. All right? So now, let's move on to the next question. We're not going to get through this whole question this morning. We're going to pick it up tonight, but we're going to do a couple of the arguments here this morning. And I mentioned there are three arguments for the existence of God. The first one is known as the beginning of the universe, or from the beginning of the universe, known as the cosmological argument. Cosmological comes from the Greek word cosmos, which means world or universe. And it says if the universe had a beginning, it must have had a beginner. The second argument is the argument from design, known as the teleological argument. Telos is a Greek word meaning design or purpose. And it says if there's design in the universe and design in you, there must be a designer. We're going to look at that evidence here in just a minute. The third argument, however, is not scientific like the first two. It's more philosophical in nature, yet it's the argument we've all understood since we were very small children. It's called the moral argument, from morality. And it says this: if there's one thing morally wrong out there, just one, say it's wrong to torture babies for fun, or it's wrong to murder 6 million people in a Holocaust, then there has to be a God. Why? Because if there is no standard beyond humanity, then everything's just a matter of opinion. That's just your opinion against a baby torturer's opinion, or your opinion against Hitler's opinion. And we all know those things aren't just a matter of opinion. If that's the case, there must be a standard of goodness, righteousness, justice outside of ourselves to which we're obligated to obey, and any deviation from that standard would be what we would call evil. If that standard doesn't exist, you couldn't even say murder was wrong. It would just be your opinion. Well, we know murder's wrong, so God must exist. Now, we'll get to that tonight, but we got to start right here at the cosmological argument. Now, you got to admit, it was worth coming here this morning just to see that. Just to see God move like that. Didn't you? Wasn't that worth it? I mean, come on. Some of you have said, I've never seen God move. Oh, yeah? Watch this. Look at that. Huh? Now, this is the argument that many say points back to the big... Now, I know some of you are going, Frank, you know, we're Christians in here, and we don't believe in the Big Bang. You guys don't believe in the Big Bang? I believe in the Big Bang. I just know who banged it. In fact, In fact, the evidence for the Big Bang is so good that even atheists are admitting the data for it. Stephen Hawking, who was the top physicist perhaps in the world until he died a couple of years ago, he was an atheist, as you know, and here's what he said. He said, almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Now, Hawking tried to come up with another explanation other than God. He failed, but he's admitting the data, that space-time and matter literally had a beginning out of nothing. Now, it wasn't just Hawking who said this, as he said, just about everybody believes it. An agnostic astronomer by the name of Alexander Vilenkin, actually a friend of Hawking, who has written a number of books. He's an agnostic, but here's the way he put it. Check this out. He said, with the proof now in place, cosmologists, and by the way, a cosmologist is not someone that puts on your makeup, all right? Cosmologist is someone that studies the origin of the universe. Cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is now no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Now, there's a couple of words I want to highlight in this quote. Number one is proof. Why is he using the word proof here? Unusual for scientists to use the word proof. As you know, science is tentative. But according to Vilenkin, he sees so much evidence converge at one point. What point? That the universe had a beginning? But he says it constitutes a proof. The other word here is the word problem. Why is it a problem that the universe had a beginning? Well, if you're a scientist and you think everything has a natural cause, it's a problem, because if all of nature had a beginning, it couldn't be a natural cause. Nature didn't exist. It's got to be a cause outside of nature, something we would call supernature. Like super means beyond, right? Why do we call Superman Superman? Because he's beyond the man. We call supernatural because it's beyond the natural. Now, we're not going to look at the evidence for this. Why? Number one, we don't have time. Number two, it's all in the book. Chapter 3, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. And number three, it's not controversial. Even the atheists are admitting it. What we're going to do is just jump to the bottom line. Here's the bottom line. If the universe had a beginning, it seems it must have had a beginner. We got two options here. Either no one created something out of nothing, which is the atheistic view, or someone created something out of nothing, which is the theistic view. Now, here's my only question. Which view is more reasonable? That no one created something out of nothing, or that someone created something out of nothing? What do you think? I was at Texas A&M. Texas A&M mating call. About 10 years ago, and I put this slide up, and an atheist in the audience said, oh, I think number one is more reasonable. I said, number one? Let's look at number two for a second. Number two says, someone created something out of nothing. Now, that's a miracle, right? But at least you got a miracle worker. You got someone. Number one is a miracle with no miracle worker. That's clearly absurd. Do you realize, ladies and gentlemen, that everybody believes in at least one miracle? Christians believe in a miracle, at least one. Well, they believe in at least two. Let me say that. They believe that someone created something out of nothing, and also the resurrection, obviously. But atheists now are believing that no one created something out of nothing. That's a miracle too. Which one takes more faith? It's the atheists that have all the faith that no one created something out of nothing. In fact, I said to the audience at Texas A&M that night, I said, to show you how seriously we all take the law of causality, and by the way, the law of causality doesn't say everything has a cause. The law of causality says everything that comes to be has a cause. There has to be an uncaused first cause. Either it's the universe or something outside the universe. There has to be something that's eternal, something that didn't have a beginning, that created everything else and sustains everything else. Because you can't go on an infinite regress. There's got to be an uncaused first cause. Look, it's either the universe or something outside the universe. The Bible calls this being the great I am. And this comes from actually Exodus 3:14, the burning bush. Do you remember when God appeared to Charlton Heston? And he says, he asked God, who should I tell the Israelites you are? And what does God say? Tell them I am sends you. Jesus in John 8:58 says, I am. He's quoting the same verse. Anyway, I said to everybody that night there in the auditorium, I said, to show you how seriously we all take the law of causality, that things don't pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause. There is nobody sitting here in this auditorium tonight who is currently worried that as you sit here, a hippopotamus has appeared out of nothing, by nothing, in your dorm room and is currently pooping on your pillow, right? You don't worry about that. You're not worried that, say, a black mamba snake is just going to appear out of nothing right here under your feet and start biting you. Because things don't pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause. And if the atheists are going to say that the whole universe could do so, I have a question. Why doesn't everything do so? Why don't Teslas pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? You wake up one morning, in your driveway, your Hyundai is now a Tesla. And you go, how do I charge this thing? Why don't MacBook Pros pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? Could have saved me $4,000. If you're hungry after this and you want to have a pizza, does it make sense to order one? Or should you just sit in your house, wait, and hope one pops into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? No, it's the atheists that have all the faith, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, here's a question asked the atheist. If there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing at all? In other words, if there is no God, why does anything exist? Why do you exist? Why does the universe exist? Why does anything exist if there's no God, an eternal being? Really hard to answer that question if you're an atheist. We'll talk more about this a little bit tonight, but we got to move on to our final argument for this morning, and that is the teleological argument. Now, there's two aspects to this. The universe appears designed, and so does life. We're just going to talk about the universe here this morning. And one aspect of the universe being designed is called the fine-tuning of the universe. What's the fine-tuning of the universe? It's been discovered in recent decades that the universe has certain characteristics about it, that if these characteristics were slightly different, virtually imperceptibly, there'd either be no universe or no universe that could support life. There are at least a dozen or so of these factors about our universe, like constants in the laws of nature, these kind of things, that you change them, we don't exist. I'll just highlight a couple of them for you. One, Stephen Hawking, the atheist, even admits, here's what he says. It's about the expansion rate of the universe. He says, if the expansion rate of the universe was different by 1 part in 1,000 million, a second after the Big Bang, the universe would have collapsed back on itself or never developed galaxies. You change the expansion rate, that infinitesimal amount, none of us are here. Now, you can't make any sort of evolutionary explanation for this. You can't say, well, the expansion rate evolved to this point. Why? Because there's no evolution going on. This is where the expansion rate started. These are the initial conditions of the universe. Seems to me the same being that created space, time, and matter is the same being that made the expansion rate precisely what it needed to be for us to exist here on Earth right now and from the beginning. Also, the gravitational force, if it were altered more than 1 part in 10 to the 40th power, we wouldn't be here. What's 1 in 10 to the 40th power? That's 1 part in 1 with 40 zeros following it. You say, Frank, I can't get my head around that number. I know, neither can I, so let me give you an illustration. Take a tape measure and stretch it across the entire known universe. That's a long way. You can't get that tape measure at Lowe's, by the way. Set the gravitational force at a particular inch mark on that tape measure. I realize gravity's not measured in inches, but this is just to give you a scale idea in your mind. If the strength of gravity were different by 1 inch in either direction across a scale as wide as the entire known universe, we wouldn't be here. I don't have enough faith to believe that that value just landed there by chance. And by the way, does chance cause things? Who caused this? Chance, he was just here. No. Chance doesn't cause anything. Chance is a word we use to describe mathematical possibilities. It doesn't do anything. When scientists use the word chance, you know what they really mean? We don't know. Look, there's only 2 possible explanations for that value being where it is. It was either designed to be that way or it wasn't. What's more reasonable? It was designed. We wouldn't even be here to even talk about it if it wasn't designed. Now, that's just a couple of these constants. You can also make the case that our solar system is designed with us in mind. Let's take a look at our solar system here for a second. There we are, third rock from the sun. If we were just a little bit closer to, or a little bit further from the sun, we couldn't survive. A little bit closer to, we'd burn up. A little bit further away, we'd freeze. We are what scientists call the Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. That's a lie. It's too hot here in the summer. The axial tilt, 23.5 degrees. Change that slightly. We don't exist. Earth rotation, 24 hours. Change that slightly. We don't exist. The size and distance of the moon from us. Change that slightly. We don't exist. If Jupiter was not in its current orbit, we couldn't exist here on Earth. Why? Go. Louder. Exactly. How old are you? He's 12, ladies and gentlemen. He's 12. He got it right, yes. He said Jupiter's gravitational pull is so strong that it attracts most of the meteors and space junk to it rather than us. In fact, if you take a close-up look at Jupiter, you know what those marks are? Those are comet fragment strikes that are bigger than the Earth. Thank God for Jupiter. Because if Jupiter wasn't there, we wouldn't be here. Same thing is true with Saturn, by the way. In fact, you want to see the size of Jupiter? Check this out. Okay, you got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Earth. Look at poor Pluto down here. You know, Pluto recently has been demoted as a planet. I don't know about you, but I think it's size discrimination. Take a look at this. You can hardly see Pluto. Take a look at this. That's Arcturus. That's another star in our galaxy. Here's the sun. Jupiter is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Earth is invisible. Pluto, forget about it. All right, keep an eye on Arcturus now. All right, where's Arcturus now? Way over here. Right over here, there's Arcturus. That's Antares. That's another star in our galaxy. The sun is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Jupiter is invisible. Earth, Pluto, forget about them. In fact, if the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse, look, I don't name the stars, all right? If the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse would be 5 or 6 Empire State Buildings high. The heavens are awesome. And this is just in our galaxy. This is not outside our galaxy. And the average distance between stars in our galaxy is 30 trillion miles. And all that distance is necessary for us to exist here on Earth. Now, 30 trillion miles, how far is that? Far. Take you at least 2 tanks of gas in a Toyota Prius to go 30 trillion miles. That is, if the gas pedal doesn't stick. A number of years ago, my wife and I took our 3 sons out to the Desert Museum in Tucson, Arizona. If you ever get a chance to go to Tucson, go on the south side of the city over the hill. They've got this museum out there, and it's so far from the city lights that on a clear night, you can see thousands of stars in the sky. So we're out there one night, and the guide says, well, it's so clear tonight that at 9:03, if we look up, we'll see the space shuttle in orbit. I said, oh, come on. We're not going to see the space shuttle in orbit. It's only 120 feet long. It's 350 miles up. We're not going to see it. Oh, me of little faith. At 9:03, the guide goes, look! And we look up in the sky about 70 degrees above the horizon. There's an object streaking across the western desert sky relative to us about like this. I mean, it's really cooking. When it got right about here, it disappeared. I don't know whether Scotty beamed it up or what. Actually, what happened was, despite the fact that we were in total darkness, the space shuttle still had the sun reflecting off of it. And when it got out of the range of the sun, we couldn't see it anymore. Now, when the space shuttle was in orbit, the space shuttle was traveling at about 18,000 miles an hour. That's 5 miles per second. You got trouble getting to work in the morning? Take the space shuttle. You'll be there. Now, I did a little calculation to try and figure out how long would it take us if we could get in the space shuttle and go from our star, the sun, to another star an average distance away, 30 trillion miles. This is just inside our galaxy. In other words, how long would it take us to go 30 trillion miles if we could go 5 miles per second? How long do you think it would take us? long time. You must be a math major. It would take us 201,450 years. That means if you got on the space shuttle in the time of Christ and started traveling from our star, the sun, to another star in our galaxy an average distance away, you've been going 5 miles a second for 2,000 years, you'd be less than 1/100th of the way there right now. And we're going to explore space. No, we're not. We're not going anywhere in space. Sorry, Houston, we're not exploring space. We can hardly get to Pluto. It took us 9 years to get to Pluto. It's too far. Forget it. Now, as you may know, the Hubble Space Telescope has shown us some amazing things from space. And a number of years ago, they trained the Hubble Space Telescope on 1/24 millionth of the sky. What's 1/24 millionth of the sky? Go outside one night, put a piece of rice on the end of your finger, hold it up. That piece of rice, it approximates 1/24 millionth of the sky. This is called Hubble Ultra Deep Field. They looked at 1/24 millionth of the sky, and I'm going to show you what they found. Now, if you can look at, I don't know if you can see this here, but there are mountains at the bottom of this slide. This is the southern hemisphere. Once I start this video, you're going to see the constellations come up in the southern hemisphere, and then the Hubble Space Telescope is going to zoom in on that 1/24 millionth of the sky. There is no audio, it's just video. Actually, a bunch of pictures put together. Do you want to see what they found in 1/24 millionth of the sky? You ready? Here we go. There are the constellations. Here we go. What you're looking at are nearly 10,000 galaxies in 1/24 millionth of the sky. February 1st, 2003, President George W. Bush goes into the East Room of the White House. It's Saturday morning, actually early Saturday afternoon. They turn the TV camera on. Every major network, including international networks, carry his address. Saturday afternoon, why? The president looks in the camera and says, "My fellow Americans, this morning our country experienced a great tragedy. Upon re-entry into the atmosphere, the space shuttle Columbia burned up in the skies over Texas. There are no survivors. The Columbia is lost." The president then went on to quote from Isaiah chapter 40, beginning in verse 25, on international TV. Why? Because in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 25, God is speaking. And what does God say? "To whom will you compare me, or who is my equal, says the Holy One." In other words, you want a comparison? You want to know what God is like? Here's what God says. If you want to know what he's like, here it is. "Lift your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these stars and named them one by one? Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing." The president then looked back in the camera and said, "The same God that created and named all those stars is the same God that created and knows the names of the 7 astronauts who perished today. While they did not return safely home to us, we can all now pray they've all returned safely home." You want to know what God is like? Look to the heavens. What do you see when you look to the heavens? You see stars equivalent to grains of sand on all the beaches on all the earth. over 200,000 years at 5 miles a second between those stars. From our perspective, it's infinite. Most of us have the wrong idea of who God is. We think God is a big angel. No. You want to know who God is? Look to the heavens. You want to know who God is? Meditate on the attributes of God. He's spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent, a creator and sustainer. Meditate on those attributes, then remove all limits from your mind. That's God. Now, ladies and gentlemen, since this being created and sustains the entire universe and created and sustains you, is it possible that he has a reason for some difficulty you're going through right now, even if you never discover what that reason is? Psalm 103 verse 11 says, God's love to those that fear him exceed the height of the heavens above the earth. How high are the heavens above the earth? Stars equivalent to grains of sand on all the beaches on all the earth, over 200,000 years at 5 miles a second between them. It's infinite. That's the point. Now, as amazing as the heavens are, there's something more amazing in this universe than the heavens. Tonight, we're going to talk about it. It happens to be you, but we'll talk about it tonight. And then we're going to go through the other 2 points. Are miracles possible? Is the New Testament true? And we'll take your questions. And what we're going to discover by the end of the night is that somebody actually did die for you. And that being is Jesus of Nazareth. But he didn't just die, he also rose again. And by trusting in him, you will rise again as well. Father, we thank you that you've given evidence that you do exist. In fact, we can just go outside and look up in the heavens and see that you're an amazing creator and sustainer. I pray if there's someone here who hasn't met you yet and hasn't accepted the free gift, that today they would. They may believe that it's true, but just believing that isn't enough. You have to trust in. I pray for North Central Church, Pastor Larry and the entire team. But as you know, Lord, Pastor Larry isn't supposed to do all the ministry. The team isn't supposed to do all the ministry. The people sitting in the pews are. So we pray, Father, that you would encourage them and equip them to be better ambassadors for you in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Would you stand together? Let's stand all over this room. What an incredible word. I want to invite you to come back tonight, 5 miracles possible, the New Testament true. Going to be focusing in on Jesus. Encourage you to go by his table, pick up a book. The book, Not Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, is one of the greatest books when it comes to apologetics, giving an answer, defense for our faith. But it's just so much more to that. I'm thankful for who Jesus is, that God loves us, an infinite God came down to us. That's why the name of Jesus is Emmanuel. He's God with us. And I tell you what, I told somebody between the services, I'm going to have to get a piece of sand, a piece of rice, and look up tonight and just imagine that. God, we serve a mighty God, a mighty God. Father, thank you, Lord, for every person here. Lord, if we are struggling, we're doubting, God, we discover, Lord, that in you, that you're ever present, that you're real, and that you love us and you care for us. And so, Lord, I just pray, Lord, for people here today, Lord, if they're going through a hard time, God, that they would recognize and realize that all things are possible because of who you are. God, if they've been struggling with faith, with belief, Lord, that they would begin to open up their hearts and their minds to who you are. And Jesus, I pray, Lord, that the greatest days of what you have in store for us are still to come. God, as we equip ourselves and discover more and more about who you are and the things that you have created and what you're doing in us and through us, Lord. God, I love you. And I pray, Lord, for every person here, God, that we would not only hear today what we've heard, but God, we would take it, we would share it, and God, it become a resource within all of us. You are real. Jesus rose from the grave. And God, we have a hope because of you. I love you, Jesus, and I give you praise. Amen, amen. I know it's late. Let's give the Lord a hand clap. Amen. Go by the table in the foyer. Dr. Turek is out there. You can pick up a book. Come back tonight. I know we've got a 4-hour window here, but I'm telling you, it'll start at 5 o'clock this evening, 4 hours away. Come back, questions and answers. It's going to be so good. You don't want to miss that, so be sure to come back this evening, 5 o'clock. We hope to see you then. God bless you.